This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and today we're painting the Popeye. This model was created by Tanuki Figures. They are the sponsor of this week's video. Let's get straight into making the model. Well, now I just have to wait for things to dry. Maybe that's a good time for me to tell you about the sponsor of this week's video, which is Tanuki Figures. And the model that I'm painting is from this month's releases, which has a bunch of epic models. They produce a bunch of models every single month for you to be able to 3D print on your 3D printer. And they don't just focus on one thing, they have a couple of various different aspects and avenues in which they sculpt under. So if you like printing things and painting things, these might be one of the people you want to check out. And all of this for a very low price. Go check out their Patreon. There will be a link for them in the description, so go check them out. And thank you, Tanuki, for sponsoring another video. Since I added the new rack of paints to the Groundeffected studio, I felt it was only right to test them for poison before I allowed other people to use them. So I'm taking some of them off my rack to use for this base, and I specifically chose a couple of browns, and these browns are sort of in the yellow range of brown, let's say that, shall we? Because basically brown is a form of many colors. If you just mix a bunch together, you will end up with brown. That is probably not the brown that you want, but if you come to the Groundeffected store, you can pick from all the colors that we have. Anyway, I used those browns in consecutive order as I showed them when I showed you the colors. I used the darker one as a dry brush first. The best dry brush you can use is one that you stole completely from your wife's makeup set. Now, I'm going to be honest, if you do take your wife's makeup brush, make sure you get the new one, because any of the old ones are going to have makeup on them and probably ruin your model, so take the nice one for yourself. Also, disclaimer here, don't let them know that I told you to do this. Moving very swiftly on, as you can see, after I had got the dry brushing done over the top of all that black, leaving the black in the crevasses, making some very nice detailing on all of the rough surfaces, I'm going to take contrast paint and paint that into some of the shadows and on the box on the insides of where the different wood would be, because it hasn't been rubbed off by packaging or something. I don't really know how wood works, but I feel like this is how it works. Now, across the poles at the back, there are some ropes, and I painted these ropes with deck tan. I should have left them as deck tan. Let me just make the record straight right now. They should have been deck tan. I don't know why I put skeleton all over the top, but I did it. It's a natural reaction. Freaking heck, argue about it in the comments. It's not my fault. I'm sorry. I'm dry brushing this anchor with a dark silver over the top of black. That's a cheat code for anything metallics, really, to be totally honest. Another cheat code is using a panel line wash to get into the crevasses. I used that exact same dark silver to paint the nails that are probably holding these boxes together. I then used some glue to actually hold the boxes together. After gluing the little fence together as well, I decided it was time to take some Agrax Earthshade and deepen some of those shadows that I added earlier with the contrast paint. I also added, as you can see, what looks like a shadow that would be underneath Popeye himself. I then painted some dark silver over the nails that hold the planks down onto, I think it's probably a jetty that he is standing on. I'm going to say that with confidence and just pretend like I know what I'm talking about. And now that I have a place to place my freshly painted model on, I can start actually painting my model. And I'm going to start out with the shoes because that's going to be the next thing that my model's going to need to actually stand on. and I'm going to paint that with the dark brown, and using a lighter brown, I'm going to highlight the tops of those shoes just to give them some depth. When I'm done with that, I'm going to take some black and paint that around the sole of the shoe. This is going to just help differentiate from the sole and the main part of the shoe. I'm going to use the same black to paint the laces as well, and that's pretty much going to be the shoes. They're quite simple really on this particular model. Now I'm going to take some of this blue and paint that over the top of my jeans. I left the black specifically in there because I want to create the shadows. I made sure to paint from only the top area, leaving black in the shadows, and I came back with some washes, a kind of custom mix of a wash and a contrast paint to make a shadowed area. This is just so that my shadows aren't actually black and are rather more of a blue in color. I'm going to take a little bit of deck tan mixed into the same blue that I used for the jeans and dry brush that from the top down, not going up and down, just the top down. This is going to help to create the effect of worn jean pant. I'm then going to take some brown and paint that over his belt because his belt is apparently brown. I'm going to use some bronze to paint over his buckle. That's because obviously the buckle is bronze. I mean, come on. And now that I have a base and some legs to stand my torso on, I can start working on painting the cans. And for the cans, I'm just going to paint them with a silver. I did, actually, I'm going to be totally honest, later on, I sanded off the word Spinach. And I also sanded the cans so that they were smooth for me to do something that I'm going to do. And I'll explain about later the thing that I'm going to do. But for now, I need to paint the zenithal. And after painting the zenithal, I need to paint back the shirt to black. And then I'm going to use this Luftwaffe grey, and I'm going to paint that in the highlights. That's basically just a little bit of blue mixed into your black. We'll make the exact same color, although it's probably a little bit on the purple side, but don't worry about that. I found I made it too light, and so I used some black Templar contrast paint to spray into the shadows and help to tint it back to black. And then I can paint the buttons on his chest with a lovely golden color. I'm then going to take everybody's favorite color, deck tan, and paint his neckerchief, handkerchief, whatever the thing is around his neck. And that is because I need to paint this with red, and if you don't paint it with a light color, you're going to have a bad time. Paint deck tan first. Yes, a deck tan is just useful for absolutely everything. I even used it to mix into the blue from the jean pant to paint the cuffs of his sleeves, which for some reason are blue inside. I don't really know how this works, but it is a thing and it had to be done. This is the red that I used, and it is just ball red, which is a contrast paint that is quite a bright red, but not the brightest that will burn your eyeballs out, but good enough for this situation. I then have to paint the little black stripe that goes around that neckerchief, whatever it is around his neck, and that I did as carefully as I possibly can. I can then set that aside and start making work on the skin tones for Popeye. And basically, it's the same as all other skin tones that I normally do. I start out with Pinkle, and that is because Pinkle is just the color that's going to help create the redness underneath the skin. For this Popeye, I still don't have any red ink in my shop, and so I'm using this contrast red, which is kind of doing the job. It's a little bit darker than I would usually like, but I think that actually helps with this particular model, as we really don't want the skins to be too soft in this case because he's supposed to be a rough sailor man. So I used some brown rose as my starting point for the skin tones, then moved on to basic skin tones to help set up some of the highlights and the volume of the face and the muscle area. I'm going to use most of the time with these skin tones from here on a 50-50 mixture. This is with water and the paint in my airbrush. This is going to help get those epic smooth transitions with not much effort. I'm now going to take some Gilliman flesh and paint that into the shadows. Normally, I would be using Orcish Domus for this particular part of the painting, but because this is a rugged sailor man, the stronger tones of this color will help to make this look a little bit more like a strong sailor man, obviously. Now I'm going to print out his tattoos. I printed this on just transparent wet water slide decal paper. I got this off of Amazon and I sealed it with just using a matte varnish. While that dries, I'm gonna paint the stubble on his chin and also upon the back of his head, because obviously there would be stubble there too. I don't know why, but I feel like there should be stubble there, and so I painted it. Now, I'm also going to paint his pipe, for which he can obviously smoke his spinach. For this, I decided to go with a brown, and while I was at it, I decided I should probably paint the deck tan that was necessary on his awesome cap. Then I painted the little rim with a bit of black. I painted the little dots on the side, which I probably think are actually just rivets. I used just a silver for that, and it seemed to work out alright for me. Now I can set to work on his tattoos, and this guy has some really, in real life, horrible tattoos. That's just my opinion, but that's the tattoos that he has. And who am I to judge what someone's tattoos are like? But he basically has these anchors on his forearms. That is the most important of all the tattoos. However, because this is an artist rendition, Tanuki have added a couple of extra tattoos, which I think are quite fitting, to be totally honest. He has a compass on one arm, a swallow on the other, and a crying storm upon his neck. These are all fitting tattoos for a sailor, in my opinion. Now, I wanted to also make something a little bit different for the Spinach cans, and so I printed this onto a sticker paper and cut them out. If you are one of my patrons, I am going to make this file for the tattoos and for the Spinach label available on the Patreon. It'll be available for all members, so if you're interested in that, then look in the description so you can go and join me over there. The next thing I'm going to do is take some of this Gilliman flesh and paint it very carefully over his lips and also into all the crevasses of the wrinkles on his face. That is inside of his closed eye and also inside of his ears and some of the wrinkles on his forehead. Next up, I'm going to paint his eyebrows on. And then, when I'm done with that, I'm going to then paint his actual sclera of his eye. What you didn't see me do, though, is paint brown into the socket of his eyeball before I started the sclera part. I will then take a little bit of squid pink and paint that as a small thin line on the bottom of his eye. And then I'm going to retouch the eyeball with the skin color that I'd use, which is highlight skin color and not skin color at all. But that's sidetracking. I'm going to take a dark blue, place that in a very nice circular motion in the center of his eyeball, and then place a light blue over the top of that with a black dot and a white specular highlight, and call the model done. Now I want to say a massive thank you for watching my video, and especially a massive thank you to Tanuki Figures for sponsoring this video. Please go and check out in the description. There will be a link for 50% off of this particular model of Popeye. If you want to make it for yourself, I printed mine in the scale they gave it to, and I'll be totally honest with you, I used their pre-supports. Don't tell anyone, but they came out just fine. So that means that their pre-supports work too, but also you know how pre-supports can be, so take that with a pinch of salt. They worked for me, they might work for you. This is the end of a Groundeffected video, which is the time when I need to tell you, please click that like button. Also, share this video with anyone. The reason why I say share it with your gran is because she probably won't even watch it, but you've shared it anyway. And I appreciate so much every single little bit of support that you can possibly give to my small channel. Of course, I want to say a massive thank you to my Patreons, because without them, I wouldn't be able to blind my eyeballs with light every single week, and their names are on the screen right now. If you want your name there, you can check out in the description for a link to my Patreon. Patreon and maybe support the Groundeffected if you would like to. Also, now is the time that I'm supposed to not forget the dolphin sound when I tell you to f*** off. Oh, and by the way, the bling you're seeing on Popeye's neck was made out of sterling silver. I made this myself from scrap, and there will be a video about it somewhere. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but I made that. If you are interested in purchasing this pendant, then hit me up in the messages, DMs, whatevs.